Have you ever had a moment where everything in your life looked fine? Your job was stable, your relationships were okay, your routines were all in place, but somehow, without warning, nothing meant anything anymore? Not your goals, not your habits, not even the things you used to love. And the terrifying part isn't the emptiness itself, it's the confusion. Because you can't explain why it came back. Why life suddenly feels like a movie you're watching from the outside. Why you feel disconnected from the very identity you spent years building. Here's the twist hardly anyone talks about. What if this collapse of meaning isn't a breakdown, but a reset? A psychological, emotional, and even spiritual reboot that nearly every awakened person eventually faces? Because meaning doesn't disappear randomly. It dissolves when your inner world outgrows the outer life you're still living. It collapses when your old values no longer fit the person you're becoming. And it shows up when your soul is quietly whispering, this isn't your path anymore. And that's exactly what we're going to explore today. In this video, you will understand why meaning mysteriously disappears, even after progress, healing, and self-growth. The hidden psychology behind purpose shutdown, and why it's more common than you think. The 5 stages people move through when life feels hollow again. The mistakes most people make that unintentionally deepen the emptiness. And most importantly, how to rebuild meaning that's real, grounded, and truly your own, not borrowed from society, not inherited from your past. If life feels flat, hollow, or directionless, if you've been drifting in that quiet fog, this might be the turning point you've been waiting for. Let's begin. Here's the truth no one tells you. Meaning doesn't disappear randomly. It collapses in patterns, predictable, recognizable, and almost always misunderstood. Most of us grow up building a life around what I call borrowed meaning. Meaning that didn't come from your soul but from the world around you. Maybe it came from career expectations. You need a stable job. You should be successful by 30. You must always be improving. Maybe it came from family pressure. You're the responsible one. You're the caretaker. You're the achiever. Maybe it came from achievement culture. If you're not chasing something, you're falling behind. And sometimes it even comes from spiritual bypassing. I must stay positive. I must be high vibration. I shouldn't feel lost. The problem is, borrowed meaning works until it doesn't. At some point, your inner world evolves faster than your outer life, and the meaning that used to hold everything together suddenly feels like a costume 2 sizes too small. Neuroscience gives us one explanation. The brain's reward system isn't sentimental. It adapts to anything repeated. Even the things that once felt meaningful eventually stop triggering dopamine. It's not that your purpose disappears. It's that your brain stopped receiving the emotional reward that kept you attached to it. Jung gives us a deeper explanation. He wrote that the ego feeds on identity, on the story of who you think you are. But when that story no longer matches your inner truth, the ego loses energy. Your old self can't keep running the same script, and so your meaning collapses, not as a failure, but as an invitation. And you see this everywhere. A 32-year-old tech worker in Seattle finally gets the job he spent a decade grinding for, and realizes it feels like cardboard. Lifeless, flat, like he's living someone else's victory. A mother in Texas watches her last child move out and feels her purpose evaporate overnight. The identity that once defined her dissolves, leaving a quiet ache she can't name. Or the person who goes through spiritual awakening and suddenly can't feel meaning in meditation, work, relationships, the very things that once fueled their transformation. But here's where most people make the emptiness worse. They assume something's wrong with me. They try to force their old goals to feel meaningful again. Or they panic and drown the discomfort in dopamine. Dating apps, overworking, endless scrolling, shopping for a hit of temporary relief. But none of that works. Because meaning collapses not because you're broken, but because your inner world is demanding an upgrade. And the moment you stop fighting the collapse, you can finally start listening to what your soul is trying to tell you. So if your life feels like it's losing color, You might not be falling apart. You might be outgrowing the version of you who was holding everything together. And this leads us to the next stage, the quiet, unsettling phase people experience right after meaning falls away, the silent stage. This is the stage most people fear, and the stage most people completely misinterpret. Because after the collapse of old meaning, there isn't an immediate revelation. There isn't a new purpose waiting on the other side. There's just a silence. A strange emotional numbness where you don't feel excited, but you also don't feel hopeless. You're not drowning, but you're not swimming either. You're just floating. Psychology calls this anhedonia a temporary shutdown in the brain's reward circuitry. Spiritual traditions call it the desert, a period where the soul stops responding so the old self can dissolve. Jung calls it the void of individuation, the emptiness that appears right before a deeper identity begins forming. And here's what's really happening beneath the surface. Your mind is withdrawing energy from old identities. The persona you used to maintain, the achiever, the caretaker, the ambitious one, the spiritual one, is losing its power source. Your nervous system shifts into a kind of neutral shutdown, a conservation mode meant to protect you while inner restructuring happens. Your psyche's investing in things that are no longer aligned, even if your ego still wants them. That's why your daily life starts feeling strangely distant. You open Netflix, scroll for 20 minutes, but nothing feels worth watching. You stare at your to-do list and whisper, "What's the point?" Even joyful things, your hobbies, friends, comforts, feel like you're viewing them from behind a pane of glass. And here's where this video goes further than most. A lot of videos online stop at describing the symptoms. They say, you might feel numb or you might feel disconnected, but they don't tell you why. Understanding the mechanism matters, because when people don't understand it, they panic. They think, I'm depressed again, or I'm losing myself, or why can't I feel anything? So they make the silence worse. They try to force meaning back into their lives. I should be grateful. I should feel motivated. I should get excited about something. They chase stimulation, dating apps, new projects, retail therapy, caffeine, productivity binges, anything to avoid sitting with the quiet. But here's the truth. The silence isn't emptiness. It's preparation. It's your psyche clearing the stage so the next version of you can enter. It may feel like nothing is happening, but this is often where the deepest reorganization occurs. Beneath language, beneath emotion, beneath conscious awareness. If you're in this stage right now, you're not stuck. You're incubating. And this silent incubation leads directly into the next phase, the part where your old identity begins to dissolve in a way that feels both terrifying and oddly liberating, the identity dismantling stage. Here's the part most people never see coming. When life feels empty, it's not your purpose that's dying. It's you, or at least the version of you that used to hold your life together. Because meaning is not a thing you have. Meaning is a thing you are. It's an expression of identity. And when your identity shifts, the meaning you built around that identity collapses with it. The silent stage from before creates the space, but this stage dismantles the structure, and three powerful forces pull your old identity apart. One, your values changed, but your life hasn't caught up. Maybe you no longer care about the things you used to chase. Maybe external markers of success feel irrelevant. Maybe relationships built on old wounds no longer make sense. But your daily life, the routines, the expectations, the roles, still assumes you're the old you. And that friction creates an emotional collapse that feels like meaning disappearing. 2, your inner world evolved, but your outer world stayed the same. This happens to people after therapy, awakening, deep healing, or major loss. Your worldview expands, but your environment is frozen in a version of reality that no longer fits. You can't live a bigger truth inside a smaller life. 3, your soul stopped tolerating misalignment. Even if your mind wants comfort, your mind says, let's keep things familiar. Your soul says, no more. And the soul always wins. You see this everywhere. After healing childhood wounds, you suddenly can't tolerate friendships built on chaos, gossip, or emotional labor. The identity of the fixer or the rescuer dissolves. After a spiritual awakening, you can't force yourself into hustle culture anymore. The meaning you once placed in grind, goals, achievements, it evaporates. Not because you're lazy, but because that version of you no longer exists. After heartbreak, the meaning you placed in love, partnership, and future dreams collapses, and your entire worldview resets. Your identity as one half of a couple dies, so the reality built around it crumbles too. But here's where most people get stuck. They try to resurrect the old self. I used to care about this, why don't I anymore? I used to be motivated, what happened? I used to feel meaning, why am I numb? Or they assume meaning has to be dramatic, career, legacy, achievement, so they miss the subtle meaning waiting underneath. Or they resist the identity shift, holding on to a version of themselves that was never meant to survive this chapter. But the truth is simple and liberating. Meaning disappears because the version of you who created it is gone. And once you accept that the old identity has died, you enter the next stage. The stage where you stop searching for meaning and begin noticing the quiet signals of the new self rising. The reorientation stage. This is the turning point. Because once the old identity dies, once you stop forcing meaning, chasing it, begging it to come back, something unexpected begins to happen. Your real meaning starts to surface on its own. It doesn't arrive dramatically. It doesn't come in a revelation or a lightning moment. It shows up in quiet impulses, subtle attractions, gentle nudges toward what feels real. Psychology and spirituality both point to the same truth. Authentic meaning grows from alignment, not effort, and it usually emerges through 4 timeless sources. One through connection, not validation. This isn't popularity. This isn't social performance. This isn't trying to be liked, impressive, or accepted. Real meaning through connection comes from moments of resonance, when you feel seen, understood, or safe with someone. When a conversation goes deeper than the surface, when you tell the truth instead of playing a role. For the American audience, this is powerful because authenticity culture is rising. People are exhausted by fake smiles, empty networking, shallow friendships. Meaning shows up when you meet someone and think, ah, I don't have to pretend here. 2. Meaning through creation. When you create, you generate meaning instead of hunting for it. Creation is one of the few human acts that reliably restores purpose. Writing, drawing, building, crafting, teaching, designing, shaping something that didn't exist before. And it doesn't need to be grand. A man who spent years feeling empty found unexpected purpose when he started woodworking in his garage on weekends. The act of shaping wood quietly reshaped him. A woman recovering from burnout found meaning again by painting small watercolor postcards she never intended to sell. Creation is medicine. It moves meaning from a question to a process. 3. Meaning through contribution. Not saving the world, not creating a legacy, not building a brand, but helping one person, sharing one insight, making someone's life slightly easier than it was yesterday. Purpose becomes grounded when it becomes relational, when it stops being an abstract mission and becomes something you offer. Small contribution, stable meaning. 4. Meaning through presence. This is the deepest one. Many awakened people discover that meaning isn't something you do, it's something you experience when you stop resisting your life. Meaning through presence is the feeling of, I'm here, and that's enough. Like the meditator who realized that simply being alive, breathing, sensing, existing, carried more meaning than all his spiritual achievements combined. Or the woman who found purpose in caring for stray animals, not because it was grand, but because it was real. The mistakes that block authentic meaning. Believing meaning must be big, dramatic, or impressive. Thinking purpose is something you find instead of something you grow. Comparing your quiet purpose to society's loud metrics. Meaning isn't discovered at the top of a mountain. It grows slowly, quietly, the moment your life begins to match your truth. And once this new meaning begins to flicker awake, you enter the next phase. The stage where you learn to rebuild your life around the person you've become. The integration stage. And finally, meaning returns. Not as a lightning strike, not as an epiphany, but as a whisper. This is the stage most people miss because they're waiting for fireworks, clarity, passion, certainty. But the rebirth stage rarely announces itself. It arrives subtly, quietly, like the slow return of spring after a long winter. Here's how you know you're entering it. 1. Small things begin to feel alive again. Not the big things, not the long-term goals or the dramatic visions. It starts with a cup of coffee that suddenly tastes comforting. A quiet morning that feels peaceful instead of empty. A walk outside where for the first time in a long time, the world feels textured again. The color doesn't return all at once. It comes back like a Polaroid developing, soft at first, almost invisible, then slowly sharpening into something real. This is your psyche warming back up. 2. Your energy becomes selective. Before, you may have scattered your energy everywhere. Old friendships, old expectations, old versions of yourself. But now something inside you refuses. You stop wasting energy on people who drain you. You stop forcing goals that no longer fit. You stop playing roles that once felt normal but now feel heavy. Instead of hustling or proving yourself, you begin protecting your energy like something sacred, because it is. 3. Clarity emerges without forcing you. You don't sit down with a notebook and demand, "What is my purpose now?" Clarity comes on its own. You start sensing what's yours and what isn't. You feel a quiet pull towards certain actions, conversations, environments, and an equally strong aversion to things that once felt comfortable. It's less like figuring life out and more like life revealing itself to you. 4. You move slower, but act with precision. In the old self, speed was survival. Do more, be more, chase more. In the reborn self, speed becomes unnecessary. You move slower, but every action has weight. Every yes is intentional. Every no is honest. Life stops being a frantic sprint and becomes an intentional movement, a choreography directed from within. Examples of rebirth in real life. A man realizes he doesn't want his prestigious career anymore. He wants a simpler, more human life, even if it's less impressive. A woman begins a small creative side project, and over months, it becomes the quiet source of meaning she was searching for. Someone who spent 20 years people-pleasing finally sets a boundary and feels the ground shift beneath them in the best way possible. The mistakes people make in rebirth. Going back to the old self because change feels destabilizing. Trying to rebuild meaning too fast out of fear. Expecting a dramatic feeling instead of welcoming the slow, steady return of aliveness. You don't find your new meaning. You become the person who naturally creates it. And once this rebirth begins, you're ready for the final understanding. The realization that the disappearance of meaning was never a failure, but the doorway to the life that was waiting for you. Which brings us to the final chapter. The outro, your invitation into a deeper way of living. So here we are, at the end of this journey, but at the beginning of something much more important. Because maybe meaning didn't disappear. Maybe it simply outgrew the version of you who created it. Maybe the emptiness you felt wasn't a death but a transition. A quiet clearing of space so a truer, more grounded self could finally emerge. Everything you've gone through, the collapse, the silence, the dismantling, the slow return of color, none of it was random. None of it was a sign you were failing. It was your psyche reorganizing around a deeper truth. The emptiness you feared was never a dead end. It was a doorway into a more honest life. A life where your meaning comes from alignment, not performance. From presence, not pressure. From who you are, not who you were told to be. And here's the philosophical twist. One most people don't realize until they're standing right where you are. What if meaning isn't something waiting for you in the future, some distant purpose you have to chase, decode, or earn, but something forming quietly inside right now as you let the old self fade? What if meaning is not discovered, but grown? What if your life isn't losing meaning, but shedding the meaning that no longer fits? If you're in that space, if life feels flat, muted, directionless, please know this. You're not broken. You're becoming. And now I want to hear from you. Has life felt empty for you lately? And if so, what do you think your soul is trying to outgrow? Share your story below. I read every comment, and someone out there might need to hear what you're going through.